Hi, this is Captain Everyman, and I'm here today to talk to you about Avengers Endgame and why I believe that it's a failure. Every big cult, and whether we want to believe it or not, we're part of the cult of Marvel. And those of us who've enjoyed, especially the cinematic facet of Marvel, in every cult you belong to, eventually there comes a time when they want you to swallow some big lies, and that's sort of what separates the real cult followers from those who eventually wander off and get out of it. And I want to talk about why this movie was a failure in my mind, and why, because of this cult following, people are swallowing lies about it, and how our impressions of it aren't really true. I know clarity, insight, and perspective, my superpowers, burden me with having to do this today, and I want to get right to it. There will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie, please come back later after you have. The first thing I want to mention was this wasn't as good as Infinity Wars, which was very disappointing for me. And to think that the same people wrote and directed is even hard for me to understand, because these are two very different movies in tone and also in their level of excellence in my mind. For one thing, this movie had a very jerky pace compared to Infinity Wars. Infinity Wars had this momentum that just built from beginning to end, and there weren't dead spots in it, but this movie had quite a lot. And one of the things I thought hurt the pacing was a lot of redundancy. This is a movie that was really long and, justified because there was a lot of storytelling to do and a lot of characters to integrate. But it still had a lot of redundancy. And what I liked about this movie when it started was it showed Hawkeye and a sense of loss and depression and sadness and grief that he had. And I thought this is a great storytelling device because it gets us right to the point. The snap, the decimation was awful. We're in the aftermath of it and they're dealing with all this. But then later on, there was a support group scene where the man's talking about a date he went out on and how he cried and all that. And I'm thinking, well, you've already sort of established that. So if a movie this long and so much storytelling to do, either give me the Hawkeye scene or give me the support group scene, but don't give me both. And I think that was when I first started wondering, what is going on? And then we had the same thing with Thor. He's become this gluttonous drunk of a man, which was painful to watch because I liked Thor so much. But then instead of just leaving it, establishing that at the new Asgard location, it's like we just kept coming back to that. And it stopped being funny to me after a while. First of all, it was sad and tragic, and second of all, you've already been there. Don't keep going there. Every place he goes, he's asking for more wine and ha ha ha. This is so funny, but okay, it was just too much. And I think that could have been snipped down a little bit. I could go on where they seem to keep saying the same things over and over again, or scenes that establish the same thing, and it made the movie stretch out. And I think the movie would have been better served to be shorter and more intense. Instead of keep going, for lack of a better word, they tried to be cute too much. And in trying to be cute, they lost some of the edge that Infinity Wars had. Infinity Wars had humor, but it didn't have this sort of cutie pie little influence in it that this movie tried to have. And I don't know what the writers were doing. I don't know if they got sentimental because it was their last go around with these characters, but there was just something that was off about that. I think, to make a long story short on that part of it, they sort of bit off more story in Infinity Wars than they could chew in Endgame. They set this beautiful foundation with Infinity Wars, and when they got to Endgame, they just fumbled it a little bit. They created plot holes galore in this movie. So many things they couldn't reconcile. I didn't like the fact that we seem to be set up for Loki having some big role from Infinity Wars, and in Endgame there was no payoff. He just kind of disappears and that's it. And that made no sense to me whatsoever. And now I'm trying to understand what his attack on Thanos with the dagger was about. Now it makes no sense whatsoever. But I'm convinced that they had something in mind, but decided there wasn't time to put it into this movie. And that was disappointing to me. One of the huge plot holes too, that I think the biggest one was, that was not addressed at all, is that the unsnap by the Hulk would have been a complete disaster. Just think about this. The infrastructure that supported all those people has crumbled. The capacity to make food for them is gone. The housing is deteriorated and not livable, a lot of it, because of all the disaster and destruction that took place. And no manpower to rebuild it or the will to, because there were nobody was there to inhabit those buildings. So when the disaster happens, people are married, they've moved on, they got like wives. They're going to have like, some will have children, and now they have more children who've never met. They have to integrate families. Some of these people, and you can't idealize this like a dream, which I thought the movie did. We're going to have mass murderers who are going to be snapped back into existence. We're not going to have the police force, the infrastructure to rearrest these people. And it would just have been a horrible disaster in so many ways. It would have probably caused a famine and all kinds of other stress. I would think it would be complete anarchy with unsnapping these people and just bringing them back the way they did. And I think that was part of the issue of, and I'll get back to this later, how they handled time travel in this movie. So another thing too is, this is maybe the biggest, I'm not sure, but definitely a huge one. How did Captain Marvel find Tony Stark and Nebula? She just happened to run into him. You know, clue to the writer's space is huge. It's infinitely large. So for her to just accidentally run into him, I thought that was some lazy, weak writing. And I thought there was a lot of lazy, sort of weak writing here. And this was one of them. I'd like to have seen some reason why she ran into Nebula and Stark instead of just finding them. Oh, there they are. That didn't make any sense either. That didn't. And I think when you combine that with some of these other plot devices like the rat, that really kind of turned me off too. The rat runs into the van and releases Ant-Man. That didn't make any sense either. Now they're trying to maybe say, well, see, this is the one of the things that Doctor Strange saw. This is the only way he saw them winning. And that's hard to swallow. It's very hard to swallow that those two things just happened by accident. It would have been better to me to have found a way to have Doctor Strange perhaps influencing things from behind the scenes to make them happen. But, this is what these writers chose, and I thought it was inferior writing, at least. Now, to get back to what I was talking about before, the biggest and worst part of this movie is this is the worst handling of time travel ever that I've ever seen. Because they talk about how the past can't affect the future. And they say it more than once. Now, at the very least, they're establishing sort of alternate universes, but I didn't think that was gotten into very well, explained very well within the context of the movie. And this is probably the biggest lie in the movie that the cult wants us to swallow, is that you could do time travel and the past events aren't going to affect the present, which is impossible. If we live in a universe where there's cause and effect, you can't just have branching off either the way the ancient one said, because there's no way that one timeline wouldn't bleed into another. So even if you do establish an alternate timeline from somebody else's perspective, your timeline that you're on is affected too if you go back to that point where they branch off. So that made absolutely no sense. I mean, you look at, and they explain away how other movies have handled it tongue-in-cheek, right? But that's the way it really be, because cause and effect is there. It's like dominoes falling. So it also doesn't make any sense. They want to be careful to put the stones back. But just as much as the stones, their interactions with people going back affects time. It's like the butterfly effect. So for them to act like, well, we can go back and get the stones and put them back, and that's not going to affect the future, well, that can't be true. People are going to see them that didn't see them before. They're altering the timeline just by being there in some form or another. I think of the interactions that even Captain America had when he got the stone. That would have affected time, I'm sure. That would have changed things so much. that there'd be no putting the genie back in the bottle. We all know that's true. But see, these writers just decided, well, we're just going to just tell this big lie about how time travel would be, and everybody will accept it, and that'll make it easier for us to tell the story. But see, they create this sense of urgency about putting the stones back. But other things happen in here that would have changed everything. And the big one is Captain America going back and actually living. He doesn't belong there. That is not how things... So every moment he's there, even. Every year he's there. Does he have children? He's creating alternate universes or contaminating the timeline by simply being there. And he's there for a long time. A long, long time. And there's no way he wouldn't be doing that. So the urgency of putting the stones back is contradicted by the urgency of the other things that they do. So it makes absolutely no sense. And the biggest one is when Thanos discovers their plot, and he travels from, I believe it's 2014, to our time, to the time in the movie, which is what, about 5 years or so. So it makes no sense at all, because if he's not there to put the gauntlet together and the snap never happens. The decimation would never happen because he's not there anymore. The Thanos that they kill at the beginning of the movie is not going to exist. He might be on videotape or something, but he's not going to be there anymore at that point, because Thanos has come and he never gets all that together. He never does all that. So at the very least, there's an alternate universe where none of that happened, where the decimation never happened, the Battle of Wakanda never happened, and so many other things, people's dying, Vision being killed. Those things don't happen. But we're supposed to ignore that because we're in this cult, and we're supposed to just grin and move on and act like it could be real, but it's not. It's just a mishandling of the concept of time travel in so many ways. So another thing that got me even early on was when they started the explanation. Of course, the lie we're supposed to swallow. They started talking about time travel and how it works, but in their universe, time travel has never happened. And nobody believed it was possible. So how can they be experts in temporal mechanics in a universe where it's never happened? They've never researched or studied it. That was another big lie we were supposed to swallow. So more than anything, though, I thought that the ending was unsatisfying. I know people are saying, well, it was great that Iron Man sacrificed himself, but to me that wasn't true to the character. The thing about Iron Man is he always finds a way to be resourceful, just like he was in the cave originally, and outsmart his opponents. It was impossible for me to believe that he wouldn't have already seen what this is a possibility and created a contingency for it. Now, where I got fooled was, I really thought that configuration of his suit where Thor sends the lightning into him and he shoots the rays, I had really believed that he had found a way, using a similar technology, where he could snap and take that energy that the snap seems to generate, and he was going to use that to power some kind of weapon and shoot at Thanos at the same time. Now, I'd seen that online, and I'd seen that sort of leaked as a fan theory, that there was this proton cannon weapon. And I'm like, that's what's going to happen. He's going to snap his fingers here, and there's going to be some configuration of this Iron Man suit that's going to allow him to channel that energy into this blast weapon and fire it at Thanos, and it's going to fry him. But of course that didn't happen, and I thought that was completely unsatisfying. There's no reason why. I mean, this is not... It was too much. It was too much. We already had a somber ending to Infinity War. So to come back and add this somber ending in Endgame, to me, was just ridiculous. There's no reason not to have more of a feel-good ending here. And for Tony to die was ridiculous. So the second thing about that is it contradicts everything they already did, which just seems to happen a lot. I was thinking when Doctor Strange showed up and he opens all these portals, these little holes everywhere, thinking, are they poking fun at this movie? Because they're opening all these holes just like this movie script has all these plot holes in it, but I guess not. But in Guardians of the Galaxy, the woman grabs just one of the Infinity Stones, she blows the smithereens. So if Stark is just a regular human being and initiates his gauntlet, it should have fried him into a crisp. It shouldn't. It should have made him blow up like that. But instead, because this is the ending that the writers choose, it's inconsistent with everything, and I think ill-advised and wrong, and the wrong kind of ending. He just sort of dies slowly and gets his last words in and all that. So to make a long story short, this movie was an entertaining movie that had great moments. I think when, especially the one that stands out for me is when Captain America says Hail Hydra. That was worth the price of admission right there. But this movie failed to deliver excellence that was worthy of the build-up and the potential that was there for this unique opportunity that was presented. And it's something as a Marvel fan that sort of makes me sad and makes me wish that the writers would have made better choices and maybe taken their time more and thought this out, because it just seemed rushed and it just seemed unworthy of the moment that was presented.